What's going on, Ravens fans? We got a ton to break down on today's show. Just about 45 minutes ago, Mike Tomlin is stepping down from his role as head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll break that down, how it affects Baltimore, and then to wrap things up, Eric DeCosta and Steve Bisciotti spoke to the media today for the first time since they fired John Harbaugh. I'll give you my takeaways from their press conference. A lot of really great insight to the head coach search and what is going to happen next for the Baltimore Ravens. Before we go any further, make sure you subscribe. There is our live sub count, 16 subs away from 44-2, very, very close to 45. And, of course, the road to 50,000 starting very soon. Help me out. Subscribe, daily videos, head coach search, all that right here on the Ravens right now. Jerry Fowler is the one that broke the news earlier. And after last night's loss to the Houston Texans, their seventh straight loss in the playoffs, a lot of people, myself included, had to ask the question of, was this the end of Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh? Because it wasn't just the fact that they were losing those games, it's the fact that they were losing them by very wide margins. And if you watched last night's game, which I'm sure a lot of you watched it like me, and were very delighted in seeing the Houston Texans actually put it on the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's kind of what's happened to them in the postseason for the last decade or so. 19 years. That's how long he's been there. Well, they notified them that he's not getting fired. He's stepping down. Never had a losing season. 193, 114-2 regular season record. Of course, he's a Super Bowl champion as well. Long and storied history between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens. Long and storied history between Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh. Unfortunately, Mike Tomlin did get the better of John Harbaugh. 25-19 record between the two of them in the 44 games they coached against each other. 4 of those being playoff games, and those were split 2-2. The AFC North is going to look a lot different next season. John Harbaugh, fired. Kevin Stefanski, fired. Mike Tomlin stepping down. In fact, Zac Taylor is the only coach that will remain, which is funny because I think out of all of those 4 guys, Zac Taylor might be the last one that I would want to coach my football team. Well, he's the only one staying in his current spot in the AFC North. Look, this is really, really big news for Baltimore. And don't get it twisted. Baltimore's not going to hire Mike Tomlin, okay? I promise you that. Steve Bisciotti said today, the only way we look at Mike Tomlin is if the Steelers hire John Harbaugh, okay? That's not going to happen. In fact, he's going to go do TV for probably about a year and then become a head coach candidate the next season, okay? But it has an impact on Baltimore, for sure. Number one, Lamar Jackson is free from having to play Mike Tomlin twice a year. Might be the beginning of the end in Pittsburgh, and that's just another job available on the open market. Let's start with Lamar Jackson, though, because Mike Tomlin really, really did a good job defending Lamar, okay? Now, Lamar did a lot better over the last couple of years when playing the Steelers, but still, in his career, 57.7% completion percentage, 174 passing yards a game, 12 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. There was just something about the way that Mike Tomlin was able to call a defense against Lamar Jackson that gave him fits. Well, you're not going to have that problem anymore. Now, I was never too worried about it. I've always been a Lamar Jackson believer. Always been a Lamar Jackson fan. But it's hard to argue against the statistics. So Lamar Jackson is free from having to play Tomlin twice a year. And now I'm curious to see where Pittsburgh goes from here. In my opinion, there is a chance. Now, it might not be a really big one, but there is a chance that this could start the beginning of the end. Because let's think about the Pittsburgh Steelers job as a whole. In my opinion, Mike Tomlin was the biggest draw to Pittsburgh. Will they be able to recover? Because you think about the National Football League, so much is done on free agency. A lot of times, if your team is close to a title, the way you get over that hump is by signing a bunch of really high-impact free agents or drafting very well. But free agency is a big part of that. The biggest reason that the Pittsburgh Steelers had any kind of pull in that sense of guys like Aaron Rodgers wanting to play there or Jalen Ramsey being fine for a trade there, same with DK Metcalf, is because of Mike Tomlin. Pittsburgh's not a beautiful city that people want to go and live in. Their facilities are all right. They share them with Pitt, the college. Like, you could say they got a long and historic past, but this day and age, does that matter to players? I don't think it does. So without Mike Tomlin, what's the draw? Seriously, I think that's a valid question to ask. And now it's another job on the open market. There's 9 currently. Arizona, Atlanta, Baltimore, Cleveland, Las Vegas, Miami, New York, Tennessee, and Pittsburgh. If I had to rank the most attractive jobs available right now, I would say number 1 is Baltimore. No questions about it. I would say number 2 is Atlanta. I get it. The quarterback situation might not be figured out. Like, that might be a tough thing. But they've got Bijan. They've got Drake London. They've got some good defensive players, some young good defensive players as well. That is an attractive job. Pittsburgh is up there. Jeremy Fowler, or it might have been George Schultz, just tweeted out about 20 minutes ago that this job is looked at almost as highly as Baltimore. New York, they got a young, talented quarterback, some talented players on defense. In Las Vegas, $100 million of cap space and the number 1 overall pick. That's my ranking right there. But Pittsburgh's definitely up on that list. There might be some guys that I would like to be the Baltimore Ravens' next head coach, but they personally, there's a chance they're a little bit more interested in the Pittsburgh job. I don't see why you would be, because Aaron Rodgers probably gone. Wouldn't be surprised if they traded T.J. Watt and just rebuilt this thing from the ground up. We'll see where they go. But without Mike Tomlin, Pittsburgh might not be that tough to beat year in and year out. Who do you hope gets the Steelers job? Okay? I want you to, give me a realistic name, but also give me a name that you know would have no success. Like, I hope Cliff Kingsbury gets the Steelers job. More on that tomorrow. Real quickly, we do got to get you a little bit more on our awesome sponsor. The reason you're watching today's video for 100% free, our great friends over at PrizePicks. And whether you are starting a new routine or making player picks for the first time, trying something new can be hard. But in life, and on PrizePicks, it always feels good to be right. With high-pressure playoff matchups every weekend and elite hoops action almost every night, the action never stops, and PrizePicks lets you take control. PrizePicks now has early payouts. If your lineup gets off to a hot start, you may now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. You can even follow PrizePicks partners like us and tail or fade our picks with just one click. Here are my picks for this weekend. I'm going to take the more on Josh Allen for a rushing or receiving touchdown, and the more on Puka Nacua for a rushing or receiving touchdown against Chicago. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Link to this promo is in the comments and description of today's video. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. So like you guys probably know by now, Steve Bisciotti and Eric DeCosta spoke to the media today for the first time since letting go of John Harbaugh. So it was very, very long media availability. In fact, at the current recording of this video, let me check, there's a decent chance this is still going on. Okay, it's not, but it was an hour and 11 minutes. So I'm just going to give you 13 very quick takeaways. Number 1, Steve Bisciotti knew that he was going to do. Okay? Like, we all thought going into that, maybe it was just a snap decision. He had already made up his mind that they were going to move on from John Harbaugh. He talked to the veteran players before doing it. Lamar Jackson, he had conversations with. Derrick Henry, he had conversations with. Like, this was something that was talked about around John Harbaugh before the decision was actually made. Lamar Jackson did not have a Monken problem. That was actually something that Steve Bisciotti learned from talking to Lamar Jackson. He said, I don't know why people keep telling me this, keep saying this. I don't have a problem with Don Monken. They believe that this is a roster that's still capable of winning a Super Bowl, which, as we know, is going to greatly affect who they hire next, because they got to believe it's a coach that's capable of winning a Super Bowl. Speaking of Lamar, Eric DeCosta is involving Lamar in the search. Now, involving him in the sense of keeping him in the loop. He says they text a lot. They text after every single interview. And Steve Bisciotti was asked about, how much input is a guy like Lamar going to have? He said, a lot of input, but no power. All right, I still hold the power, but I want his opinions. Number 6, they want an expert in the X's and O's. We've talked a lot about that was a massive stain on John Harbaugh, is that he didn't have a schematic advantage over any other head coaches in the National Football League. I think they want to go in a different direction this time around. Steve Bisciotti did call out the offensive line. He said it's not all on John Harbaugh. It's about a lot of these position groups and players not taking steps that they needed to. Talked about the offensive line specifically. Steve Bisciotti mentioned a lot about how much he loves Eric DeCosta, about how he thinks Eric DeCosta is a general manager that's batting about 800. So that means, look, he is not going to go anywhere. They emphasize pressure, how important that is to pressure opposing quarterbacks. So you can imagine that's something they're going to have a lot of emphasis on in free agency and in the draft. They did mention that there's a lot of interest in the Baltimore Ravens job. In fact, Eric DeCosta said his phone has been blowing up with guys who have mentioned, hey, look, your opening, it's something I want to learn a little bit more about. I thought Steve Bisciotti said something really cool when he mentioned that President Sashi Brown and Eric DeCosta were the two guys that would most likely be doing the hiring. Now, Bisciotti's going to be involved. He's going to have his input. He's going to be the ultimate one that makes the final decision. But those two guys are kind of running this process. That process is going to take about 3 weeks. They said today, think of it as like a 3-week NFL draft. You're scouting, running their own little combine of these interviews. Then they're ultimately going to make their final decision. And something I thought was interesting is that the kick from Tyler Loop had no impact on John Harbaugh. In fact, Steve Bisciotti was asked, what if Tyler Loop makes that kick? Does John Harbaugh still have a job? He said, yeah, for a week long. So I think this is going to happen unless there was like a miracle run to the AFC Championship game on Super Bowl. What was your biggest takeaway from their presser? Either you watch it yourself, you've seen the highlights, or just from something I've told you here. Okay, let me know down below in the comment section. We're going to get out of here. We'll be back again tomorrow morning. They'll be live tomorrow afternoon. Hope I see you for both those videos. Follow me on socials. Make sure you subscribe to the channel.